What's up, you guys? This is Zeus Kang and I'm making another video. Today I wanted to kind of just talk openly. There's no format to this video. I'm going to be posting, I've dedicated myself. I was completely, when I first, even a couple months ago, I was completely against the idea of, social media and just putting yourself out there. I thought, people were posting about themselves. It was such a conceited kind of generational thing. So, a couple years ago, I actually, I was off social media completely. I did a social experiment where for about 3-4 months, I just completely got off Instagram, Facebook. I got off the grid. And, for what it was worth, it was a good experiment. I think it served its purpose, but, it's like anything else, the mindset kind of changed for me as to, how powerful social media is. I wasn't necessarily in denial about social media, but I think the way that I was thinking about how people were using it and how people still use it wasn't really to my liking. But again, I had a bit of a social media epiphany, if you will. And it really just changed my mindset, the fact that social media is here to stay, and it could be it's probably one of the most powerful mediums that we've ever faced as a human species in terms of, communicating with a very large audience. So again, my point here is not necessarily to gain, a gazillion different, followers or subscribers, but really just to create some sort of consistency in delivering, the message that I want to get out to people. So what better medium? So I am dedicating myself just in the beginning to, at the very least, be making one of these videos a week. I'm going to be scaling that up to 2 to 3. I am going to be structuring and creating playlists for educational videos, mostly related to real estate, investing. I'll be just sharing kind of my experience. I'm by no means a real estate expert. I've been doing this for about 3 years. I'm by no means a CPA or financial advisor, but just the videos that kind of share with everyone kind of what I've done and what's worked for me. I get a lot of questions, from people, and they ask basically the same question. How did you travel for a year, without any money? So these type of questions, if I get the questions a lot, it means that most people are interested. And since I do share it, I thought, well, why not create a video? But today's video is basically going to be, basically a little video about me and why you should give a damn or what qualifies me to make these videos. Like I said, I'm by no means like, a world-class expert in these stuff. I just simply want to share kind of what, what my experience has been, what has worked, what hasn't. So you can take it for what it's worth. I know there's a lot of videos out there, but so anyway, so I wanted to kind of talk about myself a little bit, introductory video, because like I said, I will be making a series of this. So you're probably asking yourself the question, well, what is this, how does this guy qualify to provide this education to me, right? So it's good to know kind of who you're watching, right? So again, my name is Zeus Kang. Just a little background on myself. I'm from South Korea. My dad is a ROK Marine. For those of you that don't know that term, it's the Republic of Korean Marines. Basically, they're badasses. And so the family emigrated from Seoul, from South Korea, back in '89. To the Washington, D.C. area. It was my sister, my mom, and my dad, so the 4 of us. And my uncle, who was living in the Washington, D.C. area, had a electrical kind of construction company. So he sponsored my father to come over. And we basically lived in a basement for a couple of years. My dad was doing like some contracting work and stuff like just to make ends meet. And basically just working, long hours and stuff like that. So yeah, we came over. The story is, again, I'm not sure, there's really no way to validate this, but we came over with, $500. That $500, my dad's best friend from the military gave him while he was at the airport. So basically he was broke getting on that plane. And the plane ticket was bought by my mom's family. So we really came over to America with the American dream, with next to nothing in our pockets and 2 kids. We complain nowadays about internet speed, about social media, about not having enough followers, but that really just takes a lot of balls, at the head of the household with a wife and 2 kids to come to a brand new country where you don't speak the language, you don't know, what to expect. But he did it. He worked his ass off. So we stayed with my uncle for a couple of years. I think they had a falling out. I'm not sure. I was quite young, so I can't remember. But yeah, I think they had a falling out. Basically moved out, and we basically grew up not in the projects, but like the neighborhood next to it. So I was basically like the only Asian kid amongst mostly predominantly like Hispanic and blacks. So, and I wasn't a very big kid, you know, I was like this skinny little Korean kid amongst a lot of like, you know, big, you know, you know, pretty badass kids. And so I really had to really defend myself, not physically, but I had to, you know, they call it shit talking or smack talking. So I got really, really good at smack talking. And, you know, sometimes when I get, you know, when I go back home, a little bit of the ebonics will come out, you know, like from childhood. But luckily, it's a funny story. So the biggest kid, the most badass kid in school was my neighbor. And this guy he would kill everybody, right? He would beat him up. And so one day I was coming back from school and I got off the bus and I was walking home and I noticed that he was fixing his bike. I mean, it was, you know, his chain had come off, but he couldn't fix it, so I offered to fix it. And I mean, the rest is history. Him and I became best friends, and I talked so much shit and he protected me. So that was kind of cool. So I grew up basically from elementary school to about middle school, you know, in a predominantly black and Hispanic community. Again, being like the only Asian family. But yeah, and then, you know, middle school came around, my dad did really well. We ended up buying a house, we switched high schools. So I started, I think, 7th grade at a new school. And wow, so I went from, I had no white friends, and we switched schools. And I basically started, we had a secondary school which started from 7th grade, and this school was like predominantly white. So quite literally overnight, I went from having like no white friends to basically all white friends. So it was a bit of a cultural shock for me, but you know, you gotta adapt, right? So, yeah, so I ended up playing football, and my parents didn't know shit, right? I mean, I remember going to like football tryouts, and they're like, oh yeah, where's your insurance form? I was like, what's insurance, you know? So, you know, my dad again, you know, just to make ends meet, he worked a lot, and my mom and my parents still don't speak too much English. So I learned a lot. I remember growing up, you know, my mom, like I was, I don't know, 12, 13 years old, and my mom handed me the phone. I had no idea who was on the other line, and they're talking to me about insurance and taxes and bills. I had no idea what I was talking about, but you know, at the time it was frustrating. You know, it's like, why can't you guys speak English? Why can't you guys, you know, like my friends are, you know, they're going to camp and they're doing this and they're doing that, and the parents are taking care of the kids. I felt like, you know, the roles were kind of switched, right? But you know, it was tough. But you know, I have nothing. I mean, it's kind of the role you take on as a first generation, right? Like your parents, they brought you over here, they're busting their ass. So you know, when you're young and when you're immature, you know, you kind of think, well, like that, I'm in a shit situation, right? Like why do I have to be the kid taking care of the parents? But you know, it proved, being an adult now, that it taught me a lot, you know, and I have nothing but gratitude towards them. So anyway, so in high school, I played football. That's why I got to lifting. I got into powerlifting. I did pretty well in that. And you know, I played football. I ran track and field. I threw the discus and shot put. I dabbled in like wrestling, basketball. So I played a lot of sports. Unfortunately, I didn't play collegiate, but when I got to college, I snowboarded. I snowboarded a lot. And I ended up getting 2 really bad injuries, 2 in football and then 1 really bad one snowboarding. So, you know, I couldn't play any collegiate sports because of head injuries. So I decided to go out of state for 2 years, and I went down to Atlanta for school for undergrad. I was down there for 2 years. I went to Georgia State, and then I really kind of wanted to go home, go back to Virginia. So I ended up applying to James Madison University, and I finished out school there. So I finished my junior and senior year there with a bachelor's in business. I really ended up, you know, in high school, I don't really remember studying too much. If you played football, you know, they were pretty lenient. But in college, I really enjoyed it. You know, I really enjoyed learning, and so I ended up graduating. Luckily, I got a job right out of college working for the IRS. I was a finance major, so you know, it was the best and worst thing that ever happened to me. I was a finance. I thought I was going to get to, you know, I remember my parents fighting about money all the time, so I wanted to get my finance degree and go up to New York and, you know, make gazillion dollars and just not have to worry about money. But it was a good thing that, you know, I got the job with the IRS, because it turned me off to finance. I said, man, I do not want to do this for the rest of my life. So I ended up traveling. I took off, I think, for about 6 months. I went down to Costa Rica, and I was teaching English down there, just surfing and teaching English and just doing that. It was really my first time going out on my own. It was a little bit nerve-wracking, but one of the best experiences. I picked up so much Spanish. And so I came back thinking, okay, I gotta get a real job. I got some, you know, some odd jobs here and there. I ended up quitting again, and then I took off to Japan for about 6 months with a buddy of mine. I came back again, same thing, right? It's like I came back thinking, okay, I gotta be an adult. I can't keep traveling. But this happened about 3 or 4 times. I'll kind of talk about the other situations later. But and then I thought, well, I really wanted to go to grad school. You know, I really like business. I really like learning. So I applied. I had this pipeline dream of going to London and finding a nice English girl and getting a little spot in the English countryside and starting a family and basically never coming back. So I had plans to do that. I actually I got accepted to the London School of Economics, which was my dream school. I had my roommate picked out. I was conversing with him online. I was super excited, and then my dad ended up getting sick. So he had, I think, a stage like 3 esophageal, which is the throat, and then gastric, which is a stomach cancer. We thought that was it. You know, the doctor said he has 6 months to live, basically. So I stuck around. I know my sister, I think, was in California or New York at the time, finishing school, and my mom obviously needed help, so I stuck around. I deferred 2 semesters, and then after that, after a year, the school basically called and said, hey, listen, like, you gotta, you know, reapply again. So. But again, I couldn't abandon my dad. I mean, anyone out there would do the same thing. I'm not saying that I'm any special, but yeah, everything happens for a reason. You know, luckily, and by the grace of God, you know, I'm not religious, but you know, he made it. You know, they did 3 rounds of chemotherapy. The cancer shrunk by half, and then he ended up doing surgery, or 3 more surgery, and then 3 more chemos. And then basically the cancer was gone. So very lucky, very fortunate, because I know a lot of people with who get this stage cancer, especially when it's gastric and esophageal, you know, it's not good news. But luckily for us, it hadn't spread to lymph nodes. It hadn't spread to any other organs or his brain or anything like that. So we got really lucky. So anyways, so after he got healed, I took off again. I probably just left out a couple travel experiences, but in that time, again, I took off to Costa Rica for 6 months. I took off to Japan for about 6 months, and then the big trip really was Southeast Asia. I took off for almost a year, and I'll save that video for another time. But I basically spent almost a year down in Southeast Asia, in Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos, just backpacking, you know, doing what kids do, and then we'll go back a little bit. Before I left for Japan, I had submitted like a gazillion resumes, and I said, you know, if I got something cool, then I'd come back. I was planning to stay out there for about 6 months to a year, just backpacking again. And then about 4.5 months into the trip, I remember I was in Hiroshima, and I got a call from the FBI. And they said, hey, this is the FBI, we got your application, it's being pushed through, and you got to basically come back and fill out some paperwork. So I was like, well, I'm kind of not home, so is it possible for me to like send you this stuff or DocuSign it online? And they said, no, you got to come in. So, you know, I had promised, you know, before I left, I said if I got a cool opportunity, I'd come back, and you know, that's exactly what happened. So cut my trip short a little bit, and I booked a flight from Hiroshima to Tokyo to Washington, D.C. I went through the whole process, and from that point, it took almost about 1.5 years before I got the actual position, because I had to, they had to do so much background investigation on me because I had traveled so much. I did have family overseas. But luckily, again, after 1.5 years, I got my clearances. I got my secret, my top secret, and my SCI, which is my sensitive compartmentalized clearance. SCI clearance is what basically the president gets, and it's on a kind of need basis only. But yeah, I got hired on. I did some training with the FBI at headquarters, and then they said, all right, you got the job. You're gonna go to Alaska. And I said, fuck, Alaska. I was stoked. I mean, it was my first real job with the FBI. I never thought I'd get in, for one. And I remember people saying that it was harder to get into the FBI than it was to get into Harvard. Now, just out of pure numbers, right? So they said at every step in the process, you know, the applicants are cut by half. And so with the FBI, it was something like 4 or like 5% of the applicants get in. Now that is because so many people apply, but it nevertheless was about 4% who actually got in from those that applied. I think Harvard somewhere around 17%. But so anyways, they told me Alaska. I was stoked. I was kind of looking at like what I would do there. I was gonna pick up hunting and fishing and stuff like that. But I got a call back the next day from HR, and they said, "Hey, did someone tell you Alaska because you're actually going to Honolulu?" I was like, all right, that works too, So Hawaii it was in 2010. I packed up my bags after training. I got here to Honolulu. I knew nobody. So I did investigative work for about 5.5 years. I did a lot of surveillance stuff, undercover. So yeah, no, that was a great experience. But it took its toll. It was a job after all. When I first started, I think I was like 25, and it gave me like a badge, and it was like super cool, and the sex appeal was there, and I mean, who would ever think in a million years that I'd be working for the FBI in Honolulu, in Hawaii? But so yeah, I did that for about 5.5 years. Just met some incredible people, did some amazing things. Of course, I can't tell you because I'd have to kill you, but yeah, after a while, about 5.5 years in, I said, I really just want to try something new. I knew that if I had stayed longer, it was kind of like that point where, do you go back or do you start something new? So I wanted to kind of, I was still relatively young. I was like, I think 30, maybe a little bit more at the time. And so I always wanted to go like a real super hardcore backpacking trip. I know I did it before in Southeast Asia, but I had never done Europe. So I remember that night, before I wrote my letter of resignation, I had on my computer screen the letter of resignation, and then I had like Expedia or some travel website up, and the travel website was a one-way flight to Iceland. That's where I kind of decided arbitrarily that I was going to start my journey. So I had my mouse over the booking button, and I had my letter of resignation, and I knew that if I hit click, if I clicked or confirm the reservation for the ticket, non-refundable, I would have to submit the letter of resignation. So I did exactly that. I closed my eyes, I clicked reserve, so it's non-refundable. I was going to Iceland, and the next day I basically printed that letter. I walked into my office, and I gave them, I think 4 weeks notice. So I went home for a little bit, just hanging out with my family, and then I went to Iceland. That's where my trip began. I spent about 6 months in Europe. I think I went to like, I don't know, 15, 16, 17 countries. My goal is kind of a funny goal because I had no plan, was when I got back and someone said, okay, where did you go in Europe? I wanted to be like every country in Europe. That was kind of a silly goal of mine, but I think I hit, like I said, I think I hit like, I don't know, 18 like countries or something like that in Europe. But I had the best time, and I was in Bratislava, and of all places, and it was like minus 20 Celsius, and I was just freaking hating it. And I was like, what am I doing? I should be working, So I kind of cut down on myself, and I almost came home. I almost came back. I wanted to either go to California or Hawaii, but my friend said, I called home, and he said, yeah, just go somewhere warm, it'll kickstart you back. And I was supposed to be out for a year, so anyways, yeah, so that's exactly what I did. So I booked a trip to Bali, and the weather was nice, and so yeah, it was back on. So I spent another 6 months roughly in Asia. I went to Singapore, Indonesia. I met some random dude from Switzerland. So we went to where did we go to? Where I'm drawing a blank. Anyways, I'll get back to it. But and then we went to. I finished the trip off in Australia and New Zealand. And towards the end of the trip, my whole philosophy is, if do what excites you. If you're not liking, or if you're not happy or excited about what you're doing now, try to just think in your mind, just kind of talk out loud to yourself and think like, what could I be doing right now that like I would not like. I could not wait to do. That feeling when you're a kid the night before Christmas, you can't get any sleep because for a fact when you wake up in the morning, you've got presents. That feeling is just like, it's the greatest feeling in the world. So that's kind of how I live my life now. Like what brings me that Christmas Eve feeling, and that's what I try to do. That's kind of how I plan what I'm gonna do next in life. So towards the end of my trip, it wasn't exciting for me anymore to go see another, temple, or go, or go sightseeing, or go see another city. So I decided, what really excited me at that point was to come back to Hawaii and get into real estate. So that's exactly what I did. I think I was like 4 weeks shy of hitting that 1 year mark. So I came back to Hawaii, and luckily the agent that helped me buy my condo, she kind of opened her arms and said, hey, do you want to join my team? I said, sure. What better way to learn? So I got licensed, I joined the team, and then I was with the team for just a little while, and then I went off on my own, and I did well. My first official year alone, I was very fortunate to do 18 transactions, I think just shy of $10 million. And then my second year in real estate, I was able to do, I think 28 homes, just over 20 million. So this will be my third year, or going on my third year in real estate. But anyways, that was long. Thanks for bearing with me. So you have a really quick kind of biography on me. So the next videos following up, like some things that don't make sense to you may make more sense now because you know who I am. But yeah, I look forward to making more of these videos. I know, like I used to be that, like, I'm not subscribed to that person, I'm not gonna like this video, Don't be a hater, I'm just trying to build something here. I'm just trying to share what I know. A lot of the videos I make will be, educational and instructional, and it'll be a great way for us to kind of share feedback. So if you can, hit that subscribe button down there, and every time I post a new video, you'll get an alert, and you can kind of check out what I do. I'll be posting more than just educational videos on real estate and investing. I'll be doing like, some tour videos of what I'm doing on the weekends, and we're in Hawaii after all, so it's a beautiful place. So yeah, I hope you guys come back. I hope you guys subscribe. If you have any questions for me, or anything you want to ask, or anything you want to have me make a video on, comment down below. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Aloha.